Hi, my name is Paula Ellenbass, and I work in financial aid at Kelvin. I've been here for about for about 8 years. And I learned about financial aid before I started working here about 10 years ago, when the oldest 3 of my 5 kids were getting ready to go to college, and we didn't know a thing about financial aid, and we thought it was confusing and overwhelming. And there were folks at Kelvin that helped walk us through how to apply for financial aid and what type of aid was out there. So I really enjoy helping families better understand financial aid and how to apply for it. So we are going to be covering several different items tonight. First of all, we'll cover the timeline for financial aid, when you should do certain things to be eligible for aid. We'll talk about the different types of aid that are available. We will talk about how to be eligible for financial aid, and I'll also do a brief overview of the Fafsa and what you can expect if you are using the Fafsa. We will have some specific information as well for international students. So we will move ahead. First of all, the timeline for financial aid. Hopefully by now your students have started applying to colleges. Our application opened on August 1st, and if they haven't gotten started, the application is free until November 1st, so we encourage them to apply for admission soon. October 1st, which is Saturday, the Fafsa will open up, and you can start working on that Saturday or anytime over the next few months. In February, your students will receive their full financial aid package. They will receive earlier information about some types of financial aid that they will receive from Kelvin, their merit aid, but any need-based aid will be added, and they'll get a full financial aid package in February. And then hopefully by May, they are able to select their college. I have one daughter that waited till the end of May, and it made her cry every day for 2 months. So I hope for all of you parents out there that doesn't happen to you, and that your students are able to select a college by May. Most students select their college quite a bit earlier than that, and that's okay. They don't have to wait until May 1st to select their school. So there's 3 main types of financial aid, and these are going to be the financial aid that Kelvin has available, and that you also see if your student applies at any other schools. Scholarships are the first type of aid, and scholarships are based on something about your student. They have nothing to do with your family finances. Your student could be very wealthy or very needy, and they would still be eligible for scholarships because they are merit-based. And I'll go into a little more detail on that in a moment. Grants are like scholarships in that they are aid that you do not have to repay. But grants are typically need-based, which means you have to file a financial aid form like a Fafsa or an international financial aid form in order to be considered for any grants. The third type of financial aid is student loans, and student loans, of course, that is aid that you do repay. So those are going to be the 3 main components of a typical financial aid package. I'll talk a little bit about scholarships, and then I'll talk specifically about Kelvin scholarships. The most common type of scholarship is an academic scholarship. And at Kelvin, this is going to be based on your student's high school GPA. If they've taken the ACT or SAT, we are going to also look at that. Although an ACT or an SAT score cannot hurt their academic scholarship, if it's going to pull down their scholarship, we just won't consider the score. And of course, we are test optional, again, for the 23-24 academic year. We get that information from a transcript. Their high school transcript is something that students will send in along with their application. And if they have a good fall semester, which is actually pretty common for high school seniors because they're pretty focused on grades and they're taking classes they've selected. If they have a good fall semester, they can resend their transcript, and we will recalculate their scholarship. We'll never reduce it, but we will increase it if they've had a significant bump in their GPA and it gives them a higher scholarship. Actually, we made a decision recently that we will accept updated transcripts all the way through July 1st. So if your student also has a good spring semester, which isn't as common for seniors, but if they have a good spring semester and you want to resend their transcript, we will evaluate that for a possible bump in scholarship as well. Sometimes there's scholarships available for students in particular majors or programs. At Kelvin, we have many music scholarships, and these can be for music majors, but they can also be for non-music majors. And we have many students on our campus that really enjoy being involved in things like music, even if they're not a music major. It's just a different way to use their brain and something different to get involved in and meet other people. Your student may be considering playing sports in college, and Kelvin is a Division III school, so we are not able to offer athletic scholarships, but it is a type of scholarship you may see. There may be scholarships for other talents that your student has, like art or drama. And there's also scholarships for diversity. Outside scholarships are simply scholarships that are outside of any one specific college or university. The best place to find out about these is from your high school guidance offices. They will keep lists of what's local, and what's local is what you're most likely to receive. So I'm sure that your high school guidance counselors have already started talking with students. The deadlines and when applications become available are typically in the winter and the spring of their senior year. So you're well ahead of most outside scholarships at this point. Also check with mom and dad's employers or even student employers. We get a lot of outside scholarships from places like Chick-fil-A, where students are working and they are eligible for scholarships. Community foundations, corporations or banks or credit unions in your community. Apply for what's local first, but you may be interested in doing a bigger scholarship search. Just a couple notes about that. Your students are probably getting lots of emails inviting them to apply for scholarships, outside scholarships with different search engines. There's a lot of scams out there, so just make sure if you are doing this that you never pay for a scholarship search. We have a list on our financial aid webpage under scholarships of outside scholarship searches that we recommend. And your high school guidance office may have a list as well. And think about what makes your student unique when you're doing an outside scholarship search. These can be kind of cumbersome and a lot of work, but I've worked with students who have Crohn's disease, who look for scholarships for students who have Crohn's disease. So think about that and what makes your student unique or your family unique. And those are the scholarships I would look for first. We do see a lot of outside scholarships come in, but it's a lot of work to apply for them as well. So some notes about the academic scholarships and other merit aid that we offer at Kelvin. We have, if your student has a 3.0 or better, they will be awarded an academic scholarship. So you can see on this grid, there's several different levels with a $12,000 faculties all the way up to a $22,000 national merit. The scholarships at Kelvin Awards are really the faculties through the trustee. The national merit is decided by the National Merit Corporation, which, and they let us know who is eligible for that scholarship. The scores that you see there and the GPAs are the average test scores and the average GPAs for students who received that scholarship last year. It's not where you have to hit each number. It's actually a calculation that we do in Excel where we look at GPA and test scores and other factors from your student's application. We do take weighted GPAs, but we do not super score on test score. Name scholarships are another type of aid that you can receive at Kelvin. We have about 1,400 of what we call named scholarships, which are simply scholarships that have been donated by alumni or friends of Kelvin. About 400 of the named scholarships are for freshmen. These probably range on average from about 2,000 to 5,000. Some are more, some are less. And some are renewable for all 4 years, some are renewable for only sophomore year, and some are freshman only scholarships. Students can apply for all of our named scholarships with just one application. The application will match the students to scholarships where they meet the donor's criteria. The student does not need to spend any time trying to figure out which scholarships to apply for, because the application will do that work for them. The donor criteria could be based on where the student's from, what they're majoring in, high school activities, things like that. Most of our freshman scholarships are pretty generic in terms of requirements. I'm not crazy about scholarships that are attached to a major, because if a student changes their major, we have to take a scholarship away, and we really don't want to do that. So most of our freshman scholarships are pretty generic. Freshmen will typically match on average 50 to 60 different scholarships, or the criteria for 50 to 60 scholarships. That doesn't mean they receive 50 to 60 scholarships, of course. It just means they will be considered for those scholarships. The application for named scholarships opens on December 1st and it closes on January 31st. And students who have been admitted to Kelvin will receive an email with instructions on how to apply. Students have to be admitted to Kelvin in order to apply for named scholarships, but they do not have to be committed to coming to Kelvin. Grants are a second type of financial aid that you don't repay. And we offer several different types of grants at Kelvin. First of all, we have the Kelvin grant, which is an institutional grant, and that amount can vary. There are state grants. In Michigan, there is a grant for students from Michigan going to a private university in Michigan called the Michigan Tuition Grant, and that's about $3,000. And an application for the Michigan State Grant is the Fafsa. And you don't have to have a lot of financial need in order to be eligible for the Michigan grant. The federal grant program, you've probably heard of Pell Grants. You do have to have significant financial need in order to be eligible for a Pell Grant that is completely based on the FAFSA that your student submits. The maximum for a Pell Grant is $68.95. The maximum for a federal supplemental education grant, which kind of goes hand in hand with the Pell Grant, is $1,800 for the current year. There is another type of grant from the federal government that is not a need-based grant, and I'm not going to go into all the specifics, but this is for students who are planning to major in education. And there's some hoops they have to jump through. There's some requirements for the type of school that they teach in and what subject matter they teach. But this is a grant that can be used to pay for college if you're looking for additional funds. It's about $3,800 per year. And we do award this starting with students' freshman year. It's a separate application. It's on our website if you want to see more details. It's something they wouldn't need to apply for until the summer or even during the academic year when they're at Kelvin. One thing I didn't mention with the scholarships, and Livia, I don't know if we can go back a couple to our scholarships page, but these are renewable for up to 5 years of undergrad study. 2 more, Livy. These are renewable for up to 5 years of undergrad study. A student needs to have a 3.0 by the time they're a junior in order for their scholarship to continue renewing. It's automatically renewed for their sophomore year, but then by the time they're a junior, they need to have a 3.0 for the scholarship to continue renewing. It's available for up to 5 years, not because it takes Kelvin students 5 years to get through Kelvin. That's certainly not typically the case. But if a student changes a major or adds a minor, goes on an off-campus program that maybe sets them back a bit, or they end up doing maybe a full semester internship or something like that, and they are at Kelvin for an extra semester, an extra year, they will still be eligible for their academic scholarship and other merit aid. All right, we can advance it. Federal student loans are the third type of aid, and your application for student loans is the FAFSA as well. Federal student loans are offered to the student in their own name. These are not co-signed with the parents. The maximum for a freshman is $5,500. The maximum for a sophomore is $6,500. And the maximum for a junior or senior is $7,500. Those are the federal limits and the maximum that a student can take out while they are an undergrad. There's two types of student loans, and what we see on the Fafsa is what will determine which type of student loan your student receives. The subsidized loan, the way to remember that is the government is subsidizing the interest on that loan, so no interest will accrue while your student's in school at least half time. That means that if they're doing their undergrad and then they go on to grad school after Kelvin, their loans will they will stay in deferment while they're in doing their undergrad, and if they go on to grad school, they will not have to make payments and the interest will not start accruing. Unsubsidized loan, the interest starts accruing when it goes on the student's account. Sometimes families will pay off that interest each year so that that part of the loan doesn't accrue each year. This year, the interest rate is a fixed 4.99%. That's for the 22-23 school year. We typically find out in June or July what it will be for the next year. So we don't know yet what that rate will be for those of you who have students starting in the fall of 2023. One thing I'll say about student loans, you can stay on the screen, Libby, that's fine, is student loans are entirely optional whether to accept them or not. If you submit a FAFSA, you will be offered them, and some colleges will accept them on your behalf, but Kelvin waits for you to tell us if you want those loans or not before we start the processing of those loans. So sometimes families need more funds to help fill in the gap of what college costs are, and there's two main types of loans that you can apply for if you do need additional funds. When my husband and I had 4 kids in school at the same time for 2 years, and we got a little stuck, we used a home equity loan. That was the cheapest money for us to borrow. But you can also look at PLUS loans through the Federal Student Loan Program. PLUS loans, the parent is the borrower, and it's a pretty modest credit check. It's a fairly easy loan to be approved for. It is a higher interest rate. At the current year is 7.54%. The origination fee is pretty steep, 4.228%. So that means that the government's going to keep the first 4.228% of that loan as an origination fee before it disperses to your student's account. You are required to fill out a FAFSA in order to be eligible for a PLUS loan, but you can borrow all the remaining unmet costs. So the cost of college minus your financial aid, whatever's left, you can borrow that remaining amount. They are deferrable, but they are not interest-free. Private loans, there's a lot of different options. The student and the parent or cosigner apply together often. The cosigner is typically the parent, but if the student has a different cosigner, that can work too. There is a more robust credit evaluation for a private loan, and there's going to be a lot of variety in terms of interest rates. Again, you can borrow the remaining unmet costs. And we have some listed on our website. We can't recommend one private lender over another, but we have some reputable lenders listed on our website under private loans. And you can take a look at those and see what works best for your family. Typically, if you are planning to use PLUS loans or private loans to pay for college, you don't apply for that until after May 1st or the summer before they are ready to head to college. Student jobs are a great way to help fill the gap in college costs. And we typically have jobs for students who want to work. As you can guess, there's some super glamorous jobs on campus like food service and cleaning crew and things like that. There are jobs though that can look great on a resume, like doing research with a chemistry or biology professor, working as a lab assistant or working as a tutor. I have a son who planned intramurals for 2 years, and it will probably be his favorite job he ever has his whole career. I have a daughter who worked in our accounting office and learned she hated accounting, which was a great time to learn that. So they can apply online the summer or maybe the month or so before they're ready to start Kelvin. A lot of our on-campus employers really like hiring freshmen because they may have them for 2, 3, 4 years versus hiring a senior who they'll only have for a few months. They earn Michigan minimum wage, which is a little under $10 an hour. If they work about 10 hours a week, they'll make about $3,000 during the school year. They get a paycheck. They can decide whether to put that on their account or use it for other expenses. We do have many off-campus employers around us as well, whether that's restaurants or malls or private homes who love to hire babysitters from Kelvin or leaf cleanup folks or things like that. So if a student wants to work and they prefer not to work on campus, there are off-campus jobs available. Internships are something that certain majors will have some very nice paid internships for students. Majors like engineering, business, accounting, computer science, communications, things like that. So it's not every major. These can be very nicely paid. It can be something a student does full-time all summer, or it could be something that they do 2 days a week, during the school year. Not only do they pay well, they help the student build a resume, and really most importantly, they help them figure out what type of work they enjoy doing. So when they're looking for that first job, they're able to zero in on the type of work that they've done in an internship and know that they'd enjoy doing in the future. You may see work study on financial aid packages. Work study is really just a fancy name for on-campus employment, or there are ways to work in the community using work study funds. These are funds from the federal government, and you have to qualify for them based on the Fafsa. Kelvin hires many students who are not work study eligible, so don't be concerned with whether your student is eligible for work study. If they want to work on campus, they do not need to be work study eligible. And then lastly, probably one of the best things that students can do to help pay for college is summer work. And here in the States, there are so many summer jobs right now for students, and they're paying pretty well. I usually recommend to high school seniors who are planning to work to pay for college during the summer before college that before spring break hits, know what you're going to do for the summer for work so that you don't wait until after graduation to spend a couple weeks looking for a job, so that you can get started right away for the summer job. All right, I am going to talk a little bit about the FAFSA, but before that, I'm going to talk a little bit about international student aid and how students can be eligible for financial aid if they are not from the US and are not able to submit a FAFSA because they're not US citizens. International students are eligible for the academic scholarships and other merit aid that I described earlier, based on GPA and things like that. If students are admitted by mid-January, international students can also apply for the named scholarships. Again, that application is open in December and January, and we have some scholarships specifically for international, plus international students are eligible for other named scholarships. If an international student wants to be considered for additional need-based aid, which comes in the form at Kelvin of an international student grant, students who are not US citizens can submit what's called an international student financial aid form, and you'll find that on our website. And you will give us similar information to what US students provide on a FAFSA, and we will evaluate that for a need-based grant. Unfortunately, students who come to Kelvin from outside the US and are not US citizens are not eligible for federal grants like the Pell Grants, and they are not eligible for federal student loans. You do have to be, the student themselves has to be a US citizen to be eligible for those. The parents do not have to be US citizens. So if the student is eligible, they can submit a FAFSA even if their parents are not citizens. So now we'll go on to the FAFSA.
Paula, you're good, Paula. I can hear and see you just fine. I think Livy in the background froze with her PowerPoint.
Okay, well, I will just keep talking about the FAFSA then. The only real deadline for Kelvin is, in order to be eligible for that Michigan grant, you must submit the FAFSA by March 1st. If you submit any later than that, your student will not be able to receive the Michigan grant, even if they show financial need for that upcoming year. FAFSA is something that you apply for each year if you want to be considered for need-based aid. And we do not require the FAFSA at Kelvin, but we do recommend it. It's the only way you can be considered for need-based aid. One thing I want to point out is it is a free application, and there are websites out there where you can get started and they'll charge you to submit the FAFSA, and there's no reason to do that. So make sure you're on the FAFSA website, which is studentaid.gov. And for the FAFSA, for those of you who have a student who will be a freshman in the fall of 2023, you will be submitting the 2023-2024 FAFSA, and you will use 2021 tax and income information on that FAFSA. And I'll give some more details about that in a moment. We can go on. And again. So some things about the FAFSA that I'll highlight. Probably the hardest thing about the FAFSA is the FSA. Can we go back one more? The FSA ID is a student's login and password to get into the FAFSA and to submit it. FSA just stands for Federal Student Aid. And this is an ID that the student needs to have, and they can use their FSA ID through their years at Kelvin, and then through grad school, they'll use the same one. And then each student will have to have one parent who also creates an FSA ID. And your parent ID will be able to be used for all of your children. One note about the FSA ID, it is tied to an email address. It needs to be a unique email address. The parent and the student cannot have the same email. And I always recommend, if your student, don't have your student use their high school email. So if they have an email that's tied to their high school, that's going to shut down next summer after they graduate. So have them create a Gmail or something similar and use that email address so they can continue using that throughout their college years. You can create that before October 1st. You can do that this week, and it takes a little bit of time. One of the difficult things about the FSA ID is if you lose it, it takes a little bit of work to find it back. So I always recommend put it somewhere where you won't lose it, because this is something you're going to use once a year, maybe twice a year. And so put it in your phone, or if you have a safe deposit box at home, put it in there or somewhere where you'll keep track of it. You will thank yourself in a year when you are getting to work on the FAFSA again. There is a save key on the FAFSA. So if you are working on it and you have to stop working because you either maybe left some investment information at the office and you need that, or you're just running out of time, the FAFSA will save whatever you've entered already. You won't have to start from scratch when you pick it up again. There's some skip logic, which means there's certain questions that if you answer no, they may skip the next 10 or 15 questions. For example, they may ask, do you have 30,000 more in assets? And if you answer no, it may skip all the rest of the asset questions. So that's a really nice feature. You don't feel like you get bogged down in questions that have nothing to do with your family. The help feature on the FAFSA is actually really helpful. It's a little blue circle with a question mark in it. And if you hover over that circle, you will see exactly what they're looking for on that question. You will see that little circle on every question. And if you're confused at all, you just hover over that and it tells you exactly what they're looking for. It's super helpful. The contact information is also helpful. If you need to reach FSA ID, they will be available. You could end up on the phone for a little bit. I recommend using live chat because they're very responsive pretty quickly, but you may have to call them and they will walk you through any issues you're having. There is an email function as well. I haven't had as much luck with that. So I recommend either calling them on their 800 number or using live chat if you need to connect with federal student aid while you're doing your FAFSA. And if you have everything ready when you sit down to do the FAFSA, it will probably take you about 30 minutes to complete, probably 20 minutes in future years. So to prepare for the FAFSA, you'll want to have those FSA IDs and passwords. You can create them when you are starting work on the FAFSA, or you can create them before this week or before you get started on the FAFSA. You will need social security numbers for the student and for parents. You will need your tax information or tax returns, W-2s, things like that for the 2021 income year. Any records of untaxed income. And while your income, they look at 2021, any information on assets, checking accounts, savings accounts, investments, things like that, that is a snapshot of the day you're submitting the FAFSA. So it's what assets or investments you have the day you are working on the FAFSA. So maybe you're wondering what goes into the FAFSA. How do they determine your financial need? And they look at several different factors. Probably the biggest factor is parent income for 2021. And a smaller factor is parent assets. They will actually exclude several types of assets from the FAFSA. You're not required to report these. You do not have to report equity in your primary home. If you have a cottage or a second home, you do have to report that equity, but your primary home, you could have $1 million home and owe nothing on it, and you would not have to report that equity. Any retirement accounts that you have, you do not have to report as an investment or an asset. FAFSA does not expect you to cash in all your retirement to pay for your college. They don't have you report that. If you have a business or a farm, you do need to report the equity in that business or farm, unless it's a family business or a family farm. That is defined as a business or a farm with 100 or less employees, and the parents own 51% or more. So if you own it with your two sisters and each of you own 33%, you don't have 51%, so it does not qualify as a family business. But if you own 51% or more and have 100 or less employees, you do have to report the equity in that family farm or family business. The size of your family is a big factor. The bigger your family, the more that they're going to account for that in terms of the equations that they use to determine your financial need. Having more than one student in college is a big factor. And it can essentially, if you go from one in college to two in college, it makes each student twice as needy as what the one student was. Then maybe one graduates and all of a sudden they're half as needy. So it can go both ways. And then student income and assets are also factors on the FAFSA, and your student may not have worked in 2021, and that is just fine. You'll answer did not work or did not file taxes. Sometimes I will have a student tell me I'm not going to work in the summer or while I'm in college because we don't want to have it affect my financial aid. And I completely get where that logic comes from, but it's really not accurate. If a student's making $8,000 or less, it's as though FAFSA sees it as zero. They don't even consider it in the equations. If a student is making more than that, it will be considered a little bit, but it's certainly not a reason not to work if you need the funds for college. Assets for students are looked at, they're a bigger factor than income actually. So about 20% of what a student has, FAFSA will say they can use that for college next year. So if they have $10,000 in the bank, the FAFSA will determine they can use $2,000 of that for college next year. Those are the main factors that go into calculating a student's financial need. Special circumstances that's kind of an official term that you'll find on in college financial aid offices. And it refers to those situations where you've filled out the FAFSA and you feel like you've told them everything about your family, but there's still financial stuff going on you can't put on the FAFSA. And those are called special circumstances. And we had Kelvin have a form called the Kelvin Special Circumstances Form. It's an online form that you can use to tell us about these financial situations. That may include a job loss or an income reduction for the parent. If you have younger kids or younger siblings of your college student who are in Christian or private schools and you are paying tuition for them, that's something that we can make an adjustment for. If you live in a higher cost of living area than West Michigan, that may be something that we can make an adjustment for. If mom or dad has gone back to college and has out-of-pocket college expenses, we can take a look at that and see if that would make a difference. Exceptional medical or dental expenses that your family is paying, not through a health savings account, not through insurance, we can take a look at that. This typically happens in families that have chronic medical conditions and they know year after year they're going to have a certain amount of medical expenses. The FAFSA does assume that every family is paying out of pocket about $3,000 a year in out-of-pocket medical expenses, and they account for that when they determine a student's financial need. They're already considering at least $3,000. So this is really only something to tell us about if it's more than $3,000. And then other. And other could be mom or dad are still paying on their own student loans, or you're helping pay for grandma in the nursing home, or you have special needs kids with specific expenses. So tell us about those on the Kelvin Special Circumstances form or The Legacy Award is for students where they either had a parent attend Kelvin for at least a year, or they're members of the Christian Reformed Church, which is the denomination that started Kelvin, still gives us some financial support. So we turn those funds back over to the students that come from that denomination. The third special award or merit award is the Mosaic Award. And the Mosaic Award is $4,000, as is the Legacy Award. And the Mosaic Award is for either students who are North American minorities or who are international students. The fourth merit award that we have is called the Entrada Scholarship. And this is for students of color who come on our campus after their junior or senior year for 3 weeks in the summer to be part of our Entrada program. They take a 3-credit college class. So they're involved in a lot of academic stuff, social things, service items. And if they complete that program with a B- or better, if they complete that class, they're eligible for an additional $4,000 scholarship as well. All of these scholarships that I just described, the First Generation Award, the Legacy Award, the Mosaic Award, and the Entrada Scholarship, those are all renewable for up to 5 years of undergrad study as well. And we determine if a student's eligible for those based on their application for admission. So there's nothing additional they need to do to be eligible. All right, so now I'll jump back in since the PowerPoint's working again. So the FAFSA inputs all that information, the income, the assets, the size of your family, the student information, and it calculates what's called an expected family contribution, or an EFC. And you'll be able to see the EFC. Your student will be emailed what's called a student aid report after they submit their FAFSA, and you'll see their EFC on the student aid report. And this is just an indicator of a family's financial strength, and it helps colleges determine students' eligibility for any need-based financial aid. And colleges will use that EFC to allocate the limited resources they have and meet as much financial need as they can for each student with the limited resources that they have. We can go on. So once you know that EFC, the equation for your family really becomes the cost of the college that you're considering minus the EFC is your financial need. And that's what you're going to have to figure out how to fill. You can fill that with grants and scholarships and loans from the colleges. You can fill that with student savings or student work. You can fill that with parent contribution or parent loans. And so that's part of a discussion that you and your students have to have and need to figure out before they start college. Now I'm going to walk through a few screens on the FAFSA that seem to trip folks up a little more than others. And I'll just point out some things that you may want to know. The first thing to know is the FAFSA assumes only the student is working on the FAFSA, and all of the questions are directed to the student specifically. So when you are reading the questions, if you are helping as a parent, you'll want to think as though you're the student. We see a lot of FAFSAs come in where the parents have entered their income in the student income line because they read, what is your income? And the parent puts their income. But if they are asking information like that, they are asking about the student. So just keep in mind that the questions are being asked to the student, and that's how you need to answer them. If you only get one thing right on the FAFSA, it's easy to fix almost anything but the Social Security number. And if you do mess up the Social Security number, there is a way to fix it. You're going to end up on the phone with federal student aid, and it's going to take some time. So when you're entering your Social Security numbers, just make sure you triple check them and make sure the number is accurate. Make sure you're entering the correct Social Security number for the student as compared to the parents, and that their birth dates are correct as well. One of the questions that's become trickier over past years has been, what year will the student be in college? So many of your students have maybe taken some dual enrolled classes or AP classes, or maybe gone to the community college over the summer and taken a class, and they're coming into college with some completed college credits. But in order to maximize your students' aid and to answer the FAFSA question accurately, if they are graduating in the spring of 2023 from high school and they're going to college in the fall of 2023, they are considered first year in college, even if they have completed some college credits. So that's how to answer that question. Pay attention to these questions because we see errors come in. Your student will be starting on their first bachelor's degree. And then there's also a question here about whether they want to be considered for work study. I usually recommend answering yes or don't know. It won't commit them to a job, but it may, there may be some, it may help them to have answered that question with a yes. You can enter up to 10 colleges on the FAFSA. So this is the page where you can search for different colleges and you can enter them. If you enter 10 colleges and your student wants to enter more, whether that's the day you're filling it out or next week, you can go in, and once you've submitted the FAFSA with those 10 colleges, federal student aid is sending those colleges the FAFSA, so you can go in and replace 1 or 2 colleges with new colleges that your student wants to send the FAFSA to. The colleges your student applies to will not receive the FAFSA unless you include those colleges on the FAFSA to receive the FAFSA. You will also be asked about, for each college that you're putting on the FAFSA, you'll be asked about their housing plans. So typically the 3 options are living with parents, living off campus, or living on campus. So that's a question you'll have to answer for each college that you're adding. FAFSA will ask some questions to determine how many do you have in your household and how many from your household are in college. And if you have older students that are in college and they're not living at home, but you're still supporting them financially at least 50%, you can include them in your household and in your number in college, whether they're living at home or not. Fafsa has a pretty slick tool that I definitely recommend using if you're able to. It's called the IRS Data Retrieval Tool. And this is where you can go from the Fafsa directly into the IRS website and pull over all of your 2021 income information that was on your tax return. It does not go both ways. So your Fafsa information is not going to the IRS, but you're able to retrieve your tax return and have it populate those fields in the Fafsa. I recommend using it because it's going to be faster. It's going to be more accurate. There is a process where some families have to submit some documentation to support what they put on the Fafsa. If that happens to you, it's nothing to worry about. It's actually pretty random, but you're less likely to have to do that if you use data retrieval. And the fourth thing that some families like is when you retrieve the information from the IRS website, it pulls over and the field will say transferred by the IRS. And it does not show your income. It does not show tax paid and things like that. So some families feel more comfortable when they're working with their students that those actual numbers don't transfer over. The actual numbers do transfer to the colleges, though, that you send your FAFSAs to. If this doesn't work for you, and sometimes it just doesn't work, the federal or the IRS data retrieval tool, it is just fine to enter using your tax return. It's going to take you a little bit longer. If it isn't working, you could come back and try later or just use your tax return. You can also use the IRS data retrieval for your student. So if your student worked in 2021 and filed a tax return, you can also retrieve their information using the IRS data retrieval tool. So I have about 4 questions that I often get asked at financial aid nights that I thought I would review at this point. By the way, there is a chat feature, and I don't think I mentioned that, where you can enter questions and answers. That is being monitored by the Director of Financial Aid. His name is James, and he will review any questions that come up. So if you have any questions, go ahead and enter those in the chat box on the Zoom link. So first, what about college savings plans? Do we need to report those? The answer is yes. There's different types of college savings plans. If you have a 529 and the parents own that 529 plan, that is reported as a parent asset. If grandpa and grandma own that 529 plan, it is not reported as a parent asset because the parents don't own it. If your college savings plan is what's called an UGMA or an UTMA, Uniform Gift to Minors Act, that is considered a student asset, and that needs to be reported on the FAFSA as a student asset. A second question that I often get is, how can I make my student an independent student on the FAFSA? And I understand why parents are asking this, but if you have a student who is starting college as a freshman in the fall of 2023, it's actually really difficult to make your student an independent student. An independent student does not have parent income or asset information on their FAFSA, but in order to be eligible to be an independent student, you have to meet one of about 10 different criteria. It may be that your student is 24 or older, that they're married, that they are supporting their children or other dependents, that they're in the active military or a veteran, that they already have a bachelor's degree. Once a student's in grad school, they are considered independent, that they are an emancipated minor, that they've been in foster care or have had both parents pass away since the age of 13. One that we do see occasionally is that a student is in a legal guardianship. So if the student has been adopted, that does not count as independent, but if the student is in a legal guardianship, then they are considered independent. And then the other one that we see is called unaccompanied homeless minor. And that's usually refers to a student that came to the US as a refugee student and doesn't have their family with them. They are typically, if they are eligible to submit a FAFSA, they can typically be an independent student as well. So you can tell from that most students are not able to be an independent student when they're starting college as freshmen, and there's nothing Kelvin or other colleges can do to make your student an independent student. So it's very likely that parent information will need to be reported on the FAFSA. If you decide as a parent you're not going to include your information, that's going to make your student not eligible for need-based aid. So we definitely recommend working with your student and providing that information. Number 3, if the parents are divorced or not married, who goes on the FAFSA? So which parent goes on the FAFSA if the biological mom and the biological dad are not living together? There's a couple of questions for this, and if you can answer the first question, you don't have to answer the second question. So the first question is, who does the student live with the most? And if you can answer that question, then that is the parent that goes on the FAFSA. If you say to me, Paula, it is absolutely 50-50 down to the minute, we cannot figure out who the parent is based on who they live with the most, because it's absolutely the same. Then the second question is, which parent provides the most financial support? So then that is the parent that goes on the FAFSA. Now, something else to know is, so let's say that dad is the one that's going on the FAFSA and dad is remarried, then stepmom's information also goes on the FAFSA. So in that scenario, the biological dad and the stepmom's information would be on the FAFSA. The biological mom's information would not need to be reported on the FAFSA. And there's lots of articles out there if that's confusing to figure out who is the parent on the FAFSA. So if you have questions about that, you can email us or you can look that up online. And then lastly, who should fill out the FAFSA? I get asked this anytime I talk with parents about the FAFSA. Is there an income level where it doesn't make sense? And there's so many variables, so many factors that go into the FAFSA that my response typically is, if you're asking that question, you should probably submit the FAFSA. And we don't require it, but if you want your student to be eligible for student loans, you will have to submit the FAFSA, and they can receive student loans whether there's financial need or not. We actually see quite a few families that don't have financial need but want their students to have some skin in the game, so they have their students accept student loans. They do need to fill out a FAFSA. But there's really, if you're asking this question, I would recommend fill it out the first year. If you're not planning to use loans and your student doesn't qualify for any need-based aid, then maybe you don't fill it out in the future. But if anything changes in your family, like the number in college or income or anything else, then you may want to still submit the FAFSA in the future because things do change in a family. So I am going to turn this over to James. I think I do have a couple more slides. Sorry about that. I want to make sure you're all aware of what we call the Kelvin Promise. So the Kelvin Promise is not a scholarship on its own, but it is a commitment from Kelvin for students who have a 3.8 better in high school, that they will receive a minimum of $21,000 in Kelvin funded grants and scholarships. And that is renewable for up to 4 years of undergrad study. If they lose their academic scholarship because they go below a 3.0, they would still get a minimum of $21,000. And that is a minimum. They can certainly go above the $21,000. Now, this is not in addition to the academic scholarships or other merit aid or other need-based aid. $21,000 is like a bucket of scholarships, and we're going to fill that bucket of scholarships with things like an academic scholarship or a Mosaic grant or a named scholarship or something like that. But it's a way for us to tell you today, when we can't hand you a financial aid package yet, that your student will get a minimum of $21,000 in Kelvin funded grants and scholarships. So if you have any questions about that, your admissions counselors can answer those questions, or the financial aid office can do so. Then there's one other new grant that I want to tell you about. We have a visit grant. So for juniors and seniors in high school, and also for transfer students who visit Kelvin, they will receive a $1,000 visit grant, and that is renewable for their undergrad years at Kelvin as well. It does need to be an official grant. They can't just say, oh, I went and slept at the dorms or visited my friend in the dorms. It needs to be an official visit that you set up through our visit team. And Melissa will talk a little bit more about how to do that. But we're excited about this grant. And yeah, I'll turn it over to Melissa.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Paula. I learn so much whenever I hear you talk, so it's wonderful. And there is Paula and the financial aid team's contact information, so please don't miss that. As Livy said in the beginning, or I'm sorry, Annika said in the beginning, I'm Melissa Russo, Director of Admissions, and we're really, really excited about that additional grant opportunity that financial aid has helped us design this year to welcome students to visit campus. And so if your student is a junior or a senior, we really want them to come visit campus. There are lots of different ways to do that. One would be to schedule a personal one-on-one visit with the team, which we will build out a personalized visit experience directly for your student. So that might include things like getting a really great in-depth campus tour with one of our student tour guides. It could include meeting with one of our faculty members, visiting a class. You might get a little ride on our golf cart around campus. Whatever it takes to make sure that you feel connected to the campus, we're going to do that. So reach out to my team, get that scheduled. You can do that through visit@kelvin.edu is the email address, or check out our website, kelvin.edu/visit is another way to do it too. Or I'm sorry, go/visit is the way to do it. But check that out, get one of those scheduled, because we want to both welcome your student to campus and provide that way for them to have additional funding when they start here at Kelvin in the next year. The last thing I wanted to say to you is that we really encourage your student to apply. The application opened in August. It is application time, and the application is free up through November 1st. So make sure your student gets that application in. We are ready to admit starting next week. So if your student has not yet applied or has not yet sent in their high school transcript, get that in. Our team will be reading files and moving forward with admission here in the next week. All right, I think those are all the things I had to say quick. If you have questions, reach out to my team. We are on the road. We might be visiting a town near you really soon. Check us out at admissions@kelvin.edu if you have any questions you want to send our way. We're a little bit over on time, but we're still going to take about 5 or 10 minutes here and answer questions that you have. So continue to drop those into the Q&A. And I'm going to hand the mic over to Annika, who's going to help navigate this, and we'll stay online here probably till about 8:10 or so, and then we'll wrap it up for the night. If your question doesn't get answered, don't worry, we will email you with a response if needed. So, and anything that's kind of a personal situation you might want to save and send directly to finaid@kelvin.edu in order to get some personal help.
Melissa, James is also available to answer any financial aid questions. He's online and ready.
All right, awesome. So we're going to transition to our Q&A section. It looks like we already have a good amount of questions coming in. One question we saw a lot throughout is if your financial situation changes before school begins next fall, can your student reapply to see if he qualifies for more FAFs? If your financial situation changes at all, definitely connect with the schools. But I might hand that one over to Paula or James if they're able, just in case there's any specific things with the FAFSA. I know in our case, there's a special circumstance form that you can fill out to definitely make sure that our school is aware. We might come back to that one too. Okay, well, perfect.
If a family's situation changes, whether it's in the months before they start Kelvin or even after they have started at Kelvin and life happens and income changes or something like that, families can reach out to us either through the special circumstances form or through email and talk to us about whether their situation would make a difference in their students' financial aid. Sometimes before we have you document everything. We'll just kind of figure out if it's going to make a difference rather than make you submit documentation if it's not going to make a difference.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Paula. Another question we got was, does Kelvin allow for scholarships to be stacked?
It depends on the type of scholarship. The visit grant will be stacking. And there's some grants that will stack. There's some grants that will be part of meeting your financial need. Outside scholarships will stack. It just depends on the type of scholarship, whether it stacks, and we're happy to talk to you about any specific situations one-on-one through email.
Awesome. Another question we just got is, when filling out the FAFSA, is there a way to fill out multiple children on one application?
There's a way to do that in one sitting, but it will be separate applications for each student. If you indicate on the first student that you have more than one in college, after you submit the FAFSA, it will ask, do you want to work on another FAFSA? Or I don't remember the exact question is, but then it will pre-populate information that's going to be the same for each of your kids. It doesn't seem like that always works exactly as we expect it to, but it's likely that it will, as long as you say you have more than one in college on the first FAFSA.
Mm-hmm. Another one we just got was whether or not the acceptance letters come with scholarship offers, or if there's a second communication that comes out.
So your admissions letter will tell you some great news about your academic scholarship and which scholarship you've been awarded. It will tell you any other merit aid, like that Mosaic Award or First Generation Award that you've been awarded, because we get that information from your application for admission. Then in February, you'll get a second letter, and that will add any of the need-based aid that you receive because of your FAFSA. And it will also add any of those named scholarships that you may receive. So most of those are added to the financial aid package that you get in February. And that's going to show you a bottom line of what it's going to cost for your student to go to Kelvin and what aid your student's being supported with at Kelvin to make it work for your family.
It looks like we've gotten a few different questions about our visit grant, which is great. It's new. Melissa, do you want to talk a little bit more about like who qualifies, if you visited before, how that affects you?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I was a little light on the details at first, and everybody's excited about it. We've gotten the same kinds of questions via phone and email in the office as well. So this is a new grant that just became available starting September 1st. So it is qualifying for visits that are happening from September 1st forward, whether your student is a current junior or senior. We're looking for the visit to happen from September 1st, 2022. So this last month here, forward into this next year. We do recognize that students certainly might have visited in the past. We have a lot of opportunities for students to take a deeper dive into Kelvin and different options. We have ways that you can do an individual visit, like I mentioned. You could join one of our really fun, cool events called Fall Open House on October 14th, where you have food trucks and volleyball games, and it's a crazy fun night. That one qualifies. We also have an option to come to any one of the Discovery Days that are happening on Fridays. There also are some online webinar options if you live outside the US. So if you are an international family, there are also some ways that you can qualify based on that too. Looking to engage students in that in-depth way during this next year. So check out the details. It is on that visit part of the web page. There are some kind of like the small print, fine print is all in there. Check that out, see if that answers your questions. But if not, certainly reach back out to our team to get help.
Awesome. Thank you. So hopefully that helped clarify, but definitely reach out if you have any questions, either about the visit grant, FAFSA, anything like that. We'd love to keep helping you. It looks like we have time for one or two more questions. Paula, this is one for you. Do you have better odds of receiving more from your FAFSA if you fill it out earlier rather than later?
At Kelvin, that does not make a difference. We will look at what your financial need is, and we will meet as much of your financial need as we can, regardless of when you fill out the FAFSA, with the exception of one thing. and that's that Michigan grant. So if you're from Michigan and you're eligible for the Michigan tuition grant of $3,000, you must file the FAFSA by March 1st. I recommend having the FAFSA done by Thanksgiving, then you don't have to think about it again. But the only real deadline for Kelvin students is March 1st, and that's only if they're from Michigan.
Awesome. And it looks like
I was going to add one thing to that. If you wait to submit a FAFSA and we're looking at named scholarships and you want your student to be considered, if you're planning to submit a FAFSA, it's helpful for us to have that information when named scholarship decisions are being made. So it'd be great if we had it by February 1st, really.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Paula. And then I think our final live question of the night, I have pulled up, but if you have questions after this, please reach out to us. Again, we would love to keep working with you. But our last question is, if a parent already had a FAFSA ID for themselves in past years, do they need to create a new one, or can they keep using their old one?
So the answer to that depends on when they created it. Probably 5 or 6 years ago, federal student aid went from a PIN ID that was a PIN number to the FSA ID. So if you have an FSA ID that you've used for other children, you should be able to use that same one for all of your kids as they go through college. And actually it's tied to your social security number. So you're probably going to have to use that same one. And if you've lost it, you'll be able to get it back. It will just take a little bit of time. If you had the old PIN number though, you will not be able to use that. So it just depends on when you created and last used that ID for your FAFSA.
All right, great. Thank you all so much for coming out and hanging out with us tonight. Thanks, Paula, for just sharing your wisdom with us. I know I learned so much, even having filled out the FAFSA for many years. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out. We would love to continue working with you, and we'd love to have you on campus again soon. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.